Hello and welcome to episode 273 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
I'm James Whittingham. This week, superstar environmentalist David Suzuki says the climate fight is over, and we lost. Not so fast, says a climate politics professor. Not to mention a certain much-loved podcast that I happen to be speaking on right now.
Sales of heat pumps have surpassed sales of gas boilers in Germany. The Germans have a word for this, which is Rheinfleisch zum Wackensgabenfleizenheimer. Really rolls off the tongue,
doesn't it? Wow. All that and more in this midsummer mini edition of the Clean Energy Show.
So a few weeks ago on the podcast, we were talking about swimming in the River Rhine in Paris. Yeah. They've cleaned it up enough that people can swim in there most of the time. They still have to close it off sometimes if there's a lot of rainfall or something. Anyway, I mentioned a movie. There's a movie on Netflix where the sharks are swimming in the Rhine and attacking people.
Okay.
Anyway, that's called Under Paris, in case anyone is interested in watching a movie about sharks in the river in Paris.
Oh, okay.
And it's not bad. I mean, it's obviously silly and over the top, but in kind of a good way. It's not a bad movie.
Right. Well, I was watching the YouTube. You know the YouTube. Todd Malogny, he is the proprietor of State of Charge YouTube channel, very popular.
Yeah.
He's an expert on charging EVs. He does lots of tests and range tests, real-world range tests at 70 miles an hour, see what you could really get on the highway on these vehicles. And he does home charging installations and reviews home chargers. So, yeah, he's a big resource for that section of the whole electrified transportation thing. Good guy. His 87-year-old dad drove the same Bolt as my partner and I own, the 2023 Bolt EV, and he had lots of cars. He's got all EVs for his channel, but he wasn't really using the Bolt as much. But he kept the Bolt EV, and he let his dad drive it, and this is what happened.
So on his 87th birthday last year, my wife and I took my parents out for his birthday dinner, and when we arrived at his house in the Bolt, I said, you know what, Dad, it's your 87th birthday. Why don't you drive an electric car for the first time? So he drove the Bolt EV to the restaurant, and he got such a kick out of it. When we came home that night, I said, you know, why don't I leave it here for a few days for you? And he was driving it around for a few days, and he started liking it even more. Now, at the time, he had a 2018 Honda Accord, and it was starting to get up there in the miles. He was starting to have some problems with it. And after a week or so, I convinced him, you know, why don't you just sell the Accord and keep the Bolt? You know, drive it as long as you want. If after a couple of months you want to buy another car, go right ahead. But you can drive the Bolt daily if you want to. And here we are a year later. He absolutely loves it. He talks about it all the time. I think he really surprised himself that he actually likes an electric car.
Yeah, so he was a car guy, smart guy, his dad, 87 years old, still got it. And, you know, he's very loyal to all his gas cars over the decades and through different aspects of his life. And he really loves this car. So, you know, you often think, well, that age group's not going to go for EVs, but that's not necessarily true.
Yeah.
And he was a guy. He was a guy who stood in line for gas all the time at Costco because he liked their gas. He said it was tier 3 and cheap. And I see this all the time at our Costco. Like there's always a lineup. Have you noticed that? Have you ever driven by? It's ridiculous. Like the people will wait for gas. I do not wait to plug in my car, Brian. I just plug it in when I get in the driveway, or not at all. So yeah, I'm heading on vacation for 2 weeks on an EV road trip, and I will be posting edited videos to our Patreon. So if you're EV curious, patreon.com/cleanenergypod. Now I've got that Bolt that we talked about that on State of Charge there, but it is about 400 kilometers range, less on the highway because that's the way it works for EVs. It's reversed, the better in the city than the highway.
Yeah.
I did get almost 600 in parts of the mountains last time.
Wow.
So I'm taking a different route because you're going slower. It's more efficient, and you're also, you know, regenerating your electricity from your braking or just from your engine, the way it works when you're going downhill. So you gain some of that back. So that's why there was 550 range sometimes and almost 600 another time.
Yeah.
And of course, all cars get good range in the mountains.
Yes. And of course, in the summer, we've talked about this before. This would be a tricky trip in the winter because you lose so much range and we don't have a great charging infrastructure across the prairies where we live. But in the summertime, 400 kilometer range, that's a good time.
So I have I went on that trip 2 years ago, a different route, but I went on the trip 2 years ago. Now my son is there, so I'm staying with him for a couple of weeks because he's doing an internship. He's got himself a swanky pad, free to stay in for dad and family. Yeah. And so why not? And we'll do some exploring while we're there. And it'll be curious to see the EV infrastructure, how it's changed. I've been looking on PlugShare, the app that most people use. And BC Hydro's gone really, their utility out there, really great utility that, has been expanding EV infrastructure, very, very active, very, very quickly. Yeah. And we get emails from them sometimes saying what they're up to. And yeah, they're doing a great job.
Yeah. And BC Hydro, we've mentioned before, they just have great prices. They've had this hydroelectric power for many, many years. So it's often just 6 cents a kilowatt hour, which is 6 cents Canadian, which is, 3 or 4 cents US. So it's some of the cheapest power in the world. I've heard people talk in Vancouver, like, Ubers and, food delivery services in Vancouver are quite common. And, just about everybody doing them has a Tesla or some kind of electric car. And I hear people in Vancouver wondering, well, how can, Uber drivers afford an electric car? Like, it seems like too expensive. But of course, when you compare the costs of gasoline to the cost of charging up at 6 cents a kilowatt hour, of course it makes sense to do that for Ubers and food delivery. And gasoline is more expensive there in BC than it is here. So the difference between the two is quite huge.
It's a bit like California. They have higher taxes on their gasoline and they're not refining it there, and they have to transport it through the mountains to get it to the coast. So that's very exciting. I also have the Tesla adapter, so I have the option of using the Tesla network now.
Yeah.
Not all of them, but most of the charging networks, all the newer ones. So I'm looking forward to that. And, it'll be a backup. Often they're located together. There'll be a couple of my Flow, third-party chargers. And if they're full, well, there's a string of 12, Tesla chargers that hopefully will have a free space.
Yes.
And I can just go there and it'll be a nice backup. Comforting.
No. And you talked about waiting in line for gas. I think twice I've had to wait in line for a charger on, a sort of a busy weekend driving through the mountains at the Tesla chargers. But since that time, there's been a lot more open, so I'm not sure if that would still be an issue.
I bet it was no different than going to Costco to get gas. I bet it was, it was pretty quick, right?
Yeah, it was like, 5-minute wait or something. And apparently it's integrated now into the Tesla operating system where they have a sort of a built-in waiting list that appears on your screen, which I think we mentioned on the show. And that would make it a lot more useful because, these charging stations, they often have more than one entry point.
Yeah.
So you're sometimes not sure who's actually next in line.
Yeah, that's a nice thing. And I think that's going to be, it's one of those things that's going to spread out to all people who charge their EVs. They're going to have, sort of at some point in the future, we'll have a coordination about who's first and your car will reserve it a couple minutes before it gets there, things like that. And, sometimes in some cases you'll be preheating your battery because the battery gets to an optimal temperature, so it charges faster when it gets there. All these things you don't have to worry about one day soon when the cars start doing the smart things and doing that. So, looking forward to that. And we'll be having a repeat episode next week and be back with a Patreon episode after that.
Yeah. All right. So I've got a couple of quick stories here. These are two of my favorite topics. The first is e-bike subsidies, which we've talked about before. This story is from Electrek. More U.S. cities are getting into e-bike subsidies. We've talked about these before. Denver and California are kind of the most prominent ones and that we've talked about before. California, of course, they've had rollout problems. It's been technically difficult for them to actually get it off the ground. But these have been very, very popular programs. And now Rhode Island has now launched its own statewide rebate program, offering up to $750.
Ooh.
Cities like Ann Arbor, it's statewide. Cities like Ann Arbor, Oakland, Providence, and dozens of others are following suit with their own variations. A Bend, Oregon program is offering free e-bikes to locals, and Washington, D.C. is piloting a rebate targeted at delivery workers. And even some utility companies like Vermont's Green Mountain Power has also gotten into the action with a program of their own. As cities grapple with climate goals, traffic congestion, and rising transportation costs, e-bike rebates are a relatively cheap way to make a big impact. The biggest challenge, of course, with these programs usually is keeping up with the demand. This has proven to be very, very popular. I mean, people like free money. People like free stuff. That's never going to go away. But yeah, it's just always nice to see. And as you travel in more big cities, you see more electric cars and, of course, more electric bikes. A lot of them cargo bikes, people delivering things. It's been a wonderful, wonderful change in the last couple of years.
Can you imagine slogging along as a bicycle delivery driver and somebody offers you a free e-bike? The government, says, here, use this.
Yeah.
You probably come home. You might be more efficient, too, at what you're doing. Yeah. And you will come home, still exercised, but, able to walk, hopefully.
And of course, we live in one of the flattest places on Earth. There's essentially no elevation change in our entire city. It's just a big, flat plain. But of course, a lot of cities have hills and stuff. And, that's such a pain to get around. The e-bike kind of flattens out those hills. Our biggest problem in terms of e-bikes is it can overcome the wind. We just get these terrible winds sometimes. And biking into a headwind can be an awful, awful thing. But the e-bike battery combats that and makes it, livable.
I'm a fan of wind now because of the refinery. When there's no wind like there was last night, it becomes variable.
That's when
the worst thing I see in the hourly forecast is a variable wind because I know that it can switch to the bad variable direction.
Yeah.
My son rented an e-bike yesterday, and it was from the same bike share company as the car company, the car share.
Okay.
And it's the same amount of money per minute as a car, as a Prius, to rent an e-bike for some reason. Maybe it's because the trips are shorter, and in order to, get that all set up, So what he's been doing is filling up his car share car, because you get $15 cash for doing that, and they reimburse you, so you don't pay for gas. And if you do the work, and it's the same with electric car, if you plug it in, if it's under 30%, they'll give you money for doing that. So it seems like a good way to reduce your costs on the car share program is to be incentivized to plug it in or refuel it. So, I love this. I notice these e-bike giveaways, people go crazy for them. And why shouldn't they? I just hope it's people that actually need them who actually end up with them. But $750, that goes a long ways toward a good e-bike in the American market where things are cheaper and the dollar is stronger.
For sure. Okay, I got another quick story here. This one is from Bloomberg. This is another favorite topic of mine. Heat pump sales have now surpassed the sale of fossil fuel boilers in Germany. So this comes after a 2023 law that approved a controversial at the time ban on fossil fuel boilers, saying heating in most new properties must run on at least 65% renewable energy. And now, in the run-up to this year's election, however, homeowners have rushed to apply for the heat pump subsidies that exist, and on concern that this new government might roll back the financial support for heat pumps. But nevertheless, this is a huge victory. Heat pumps now outselling gas boilers in Germany. This is great. The new conservative ruling alliance has indeed pledged to scrap parts of the heating law, but it has yet to act on that promise, and certain European Union regulations may limit the extent to which the legislation can be revised, because, of course, they are EU regulations that they're going to have to pay attention to. For now, gas heating remains widespread. 13.9 million units still exist in homes across Germany, according to the Federation of the German Heating Industry. The researchers at Bloomberg NEF estimate that the nation's annual spending on heat pumps needs to more than double until 2030 if it's going to meet the targets they have set for their net zero goals. So there are some subsidies. There is money being spent on heat pumps, and it is making them surpass gas boilers, but it's got to be more. It's got to double if they're going to actually meet the goals.
I'm surprised that so many homes have boilers in them.
Yeah.
It must be a European thing, because boilers are heating a fluid and distributing it through a radiator in your home.
Yeah.
Usually we see that in older apartments here and older buildings.
Yeah. Here in Canada, it tends to be forced air, but we're going to talk about my cottage again a bit later, and we're looking at, doing a boiler with in-floor heating, so we'll see how that goes.
That's the modern great way of doing something, because it's so even and it's efficient and comfortable, very comfortable, because it radiates upward and from an even perspective. All right, this is from YaleClimateConnections.org. Noted environmentalist and TV presenter David Suzuki, someone Brian and I grew up with on television in Canada when we had 2 channels.
Yes, he's a very famous Canadian TV presenter and celebrity and known for, yes, of course, the environmental movement.
But he says the climate fight is over and we lost. And this is not a surprise to me because I took one of my kids to see him speak about, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago in Regina here.
Yeah.
And he kind of shocked me in the Q&A by saying he didn't think we had any time left.
Yeah.
And of course, my kids these days have climate anxiety, and that didn't help.
Yeah.
It was not helped. My kid was traumatized. I was looking to give him hope, and I ended up leaving there feeling kind of set back. But he's an old man, Brian. He doesn't know. He doesn't listen to our show, I assume.
He's about 150 years old by now, I think.
Yes, and ripped. He's got
he looks great.
A lot of muscles. A great guy. And certainly educated me and my family as well. Not just me, but my kids watched his show growing up and they liked it. They got into documentaries and they started thinking about the world. So I really appreciate him greatly. And climate politics professor Donald Wright says, not so fast. He's in the United States. He penned a letter to Suzuki in Yale Climate Connections. And Suzuki gave an interview recently where he said something that really shocked a lot of people. Of course, after a lifetime of climate advocacy, he told iPolitics it's too late, as in, the climate fight is over. The best we can do now is prepare for the worst. That quote hit hard to a lot of people, and Wright wrote a heartfelt, frustrated, but ultimately hopeful rebuttal that says, no, David, it's not over. Have you listened to the Clean Energy Show? No, maybe you should. Suzuki is not just a scientist, but a cultural figure, huge cultural figure in this country. Someone known for calling things like they are, never sugarcoating the truth. So when he says it's too late, people listen. And for many, that kind of statement isn't realism, it's despair dressed up as honesty. Wright agrees with a lot of Suzuki's criticisms that the market has failed to solve the climate crisis so far, that economic growth in a finite world is absurd, that billionaires flaunting their wealth in a burning world like Bezos at his Venice wedding is disgusting. But then Wright draws the line, because saying it's too late isn't a wake-up call, it's a surrender. Wright says the fight is still going on everywhere. We talk about that in our shows every week. In labs and classrooms, in small towns and big cities, and grassroots activism and community energy projects, and on certain podcasts, as I've said. Even in places you wouldn't expect, like Kansas, where wind is now generating nearly half the state's electricity. Or South Dakota, where it's generating more than 100% of its electricity. They're exporting it. They've got so much wind. Or the EU, where solar just overtook fossil fuels as the majority electricity source for the first time ever. And then there's the science, something Suzuki surely respects, says Wright. Wright points out that every tenth of a degree of warming matters. A world of 2.8 is bad, but it's not nearly as bad as 3.4. So we don't get to say it's too late because what we do today still shapes what tomorrow is like. Yeah, we're going to push past 2 degrees, but 2.5, 2.8, it's bad, but it's every tenth of that degree makes a huge world of difference. I don't like the way it is now.
Yeah.
So we have to do better. We can do better. We should be doing better. There's the politics of idiots. We elect idiots all over the world to not understand this stuff, to fear this stuff. And people vote for them all the time. But this letter isn't all optimisms. Wright is honest about the setbacks. He calls out Canada's rollback of carbon pricing, the dysfunctional international climate negotiation, and yes, even Trump's 2024 drill baby drill platform, which no one's going to drill. They're not going to. They're not. It's just, that's another story. But none of that, he says, justifies checking out. Instead of throwing in the towel, we need to roll up our sleeves, elect real climate leaders, and keep pushing. And that is the key, the people who we elect.
Yeah. The tenths of those degrees, that's the important thing because, as we continue to complain about all the forest fire smoke we now have to breathe, which we didn't have to breathe, some decades ago. Obviously, the climate has already changed. Things are already bad. But of course, we got to keep fighting. I mean, the sooner we can tackle this, the less the problem in the future is going to be. And the progress is happening.
Let's jump into the mailbag.
All right, this is a follow-up letter from Tim, whose letter we read a couple of weeks ago on the podcast. Hey guys, thanks for reading my email on the last podcast. I'm currently listening. Yes, I neglected to talk about the passive solar potential with the hydronic system. As one part of your slab via the sun through the windows is heated, that heat can also be distributed by circulating the pump. I don't know if your municipality will allow it, but the cost of going geothermal when your lakefront is significantly reduced since you can put your loops horizontally at the bottom of the lake. This also avoids the increased demand as winter goes on, since the bottom of the lake will maintain temperature better than a ground would with a horizontal loop. Something I'm considering for my next build is doing a smallish sand battery buried close to the house using a used oil field tank that they sell cheap at auction and heating that with solar collectors and or excess solar electricity from the panels. Solar collectors are much more efficient per square meter than the PV. Thanks, Tim. So this is all in reference to my cottage project, which I've been talking about for years. It feels like I feel like I'm all talk and no action because we haven't started building it yet, but we've been talking about it for years now. We're getting closer, I swear. But yeah, the idea is to do in-floor heating, to do a concrete floor. You put the liquid pipes in the concrete, and then you do a polished concrete finish on it, and that's the finished floor, and the heat radiates up. I guess you can reverse it and do that for cooling as well. I don't know if I want to walk around in a house with a cold floor, but we'll probably have like area rugs and stuff. But yeah, I'm still not clear on what kind of heat pump we need. It'll be like a heat pump boiler, I guess, to do this kind of work. So that's still to be figured out in the future. But as Tim points out, so it's a south-facing property, and we're going to have large windows in the front. So we can presumably leave those blinds up in the winter, and you collect the passive solar into the house. It heats up the concrete floor, and then as long as you just have the pump running, it distributes all that heat to the house. So it's really a win-win.
So you're still looking at rammed earth?
Yeah, the plan is to have a rammed earth construction, and then it would have a concrete floor.
How's your rammed earth project at your house, the ramp at your front, doing? Still okay?
Yes, it's great. Yeah. So as a sort of a test project with our architect, he built a rammed earth wall in front of our house. There was some little bits of it falling apart. So he was by the other day to make little repairs. So some of it did chip away. We think that the snow shovelers, we have a snow service, they were shoveling the ramp and they were banging their snow shovels into the wall. So some of it, a little bit of it did chip away. So he came by the other day and, this is how you do a repair with a rammed earth wall. He just brought a bunch more of the same kind of dirt mixture that he was doing. And then he, put a piece of 2x4 against the wall and just sort of pounded it with a hammer. And so he did a sort of a test section to see how that would work. And if it holds okay, he's going to do the rest of it that way. And then we're going to maybe put like some kind of a kick plate on that ramp so the snow shovels don't keep banging into it.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
But my point really was that it's a new construction. It's rammed earth. It'll be super insulated.
Yeah.
So unlike your house, which is 1960-ish, it's not well insulated. It's been a challenge for you to try and upgrade the insulation on that house and air tightness and all that. But this new project will offer you an advantage of taking advantage of that passive solar like this house has. And this house is not great at it either. It's got a lot of faults, but a new construction, I can see you not using any heat at all most of the time in the winter. When you say you're here in the city, and you're not out there, I don't think it's always going to be on, except for the extreme cold and only at night. My furnace turns off in -40 here, because even in my house, so I think it would there too. And with the floor, the concrete floor, storing that heat and keeping it above, a few degrees above freezing so nothing breaks, that's great.
Yeah, and we're not going to live out there full time. So yeah, we're going to have remote monitoring for things. We'll probably put in some cameras and stuff too so we can monitor. But yeah, presumably we can check on the heat from where we are. You just don't want it to drop below zero and have stuff start freezing, but it'll be sort of a part-time property.
That YouTuber Tom Malogne, he had a brand new Equinox EV and he had a wild turkey because he's in northern New Jersey in the rural area.
Yeah.
Peck at his car for 2 hours.
What?
And he has it on camera. For 2 hours, it pecked at his car and scratched it up, his brand new Equinox EV. And he thinks it's because it was clean and it had a gloss on it that he saw another turkey there in the reflection and he was home, but his Ring camera or whatever security cameras picked it up.
Well, and turkeys are notorious EV haters. That's the other problem.
They are. Apparently.
Yeah. The other thing Tim mentions, of course, is doing geothermal and putting the loops under the lake. But this is in a provincial park here in Saskatchewan. So I don't think they're going to allow that, the lake being really public property, public land. But yeah, we'll consider doing other geothermal, but I think it's probably just going to be more conventional.
Yeah, and that's too bad. And I hope that 20, 30 years from now, policies like that, are more progressive. And because the place is going to burn down if we don't do something about it. And we want to protect our provincial and national and state parks and keep them in good shape. We love to hear from you. Contact us at cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. Anything that's on your mind, send us a letter. And we'll read it on the show, unless you don't want us to, in which case you can tell us. And we also love voicemails, online voicemails from speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow. You can press record on your laptop or whatever, and we'll hear your voice. Join the conversation on our Patreon page and get access to additional content. And you can now support us for as little as $1 a month US. Ad-free episodes are one of the perks, exclusive access to our Discord server, discounts at our merch store, early access to our episodes before the public, behind-the-scenes material, thank you credits on our video podcast returning in the fall, and on our audio podcast once a month, depending on the level that you support us. And thank you to all who support our show. Coming up next is the lightning round. It's time for the lightning round.
The lightning round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy, and transportation.
China added 212 gigawatts of new solar capacity in the first half of 2025, pushing total installed PV capacity past 1.1 terawatts. We started the show 5 years ago. We were fantasizing about a world that had 1 terawatt of solar.
Yeah.
China's got it. According to the National Energy Administration in China, in April, Appalachian Power told West Virginia's Public Service Commission that the company lost $40.5 million operating its 3 coal plants because it had to burn down excess coal because there was too many renewables on the grid. The actual loss was more than double that figure, though. California-based organic photovoltaic startup Next Energy Technologies has installed a building-integrated photovoltaic facade featuring its OPV coatings. Now, why did I mention this? This is one of those things that's mentioned all the time.
Yeah.
People love to jump on. This is the solution. This will finally fix everything.
Yeah.
We talked about this occasionally for years. Somebody's actually doing it now. That's why I mention it.
Yeah.
So they're actually doing it. Located at the company's headquarters in Santa Barbara, the installation features 6 transparent windows, each measuring 40 by 60 inches. Think big architectural style windows in a office building or a business. Look, the company estimates that while leveraging existing infrastructure, its facade can generate enough electricity to offset 20 to 25% of the energy consumption of typical commercial properties.
Yeah.
So that's without seeing any of them.
Yeah. So this is the idea of just building the solar into your existing building, which, as you say, people have been talking about for years and decades even. Will never maybe be the major solution, but hey, if you can get 20 to 25% of the energy from the property, why not?
Time for a CES Fast Fact. There is approximately 10 grams of microplastics in every human brain.
Oh, I'm sure I've got more than that.
If you have fossil fuels in your head, Brian, you can't get them out.
Yeah.
I'm
I've got
sure
at
more
least
that too.
30, 40 grams of microplastics in my
At
brain.
least you can feel it in your head when you raise it up.
Yeah.
Another CES Fast Fact. 1 billion people in Africa still cook with basic fuels like wood, charcoal, and dung, contributing to over 800,000 premature deaths a year, mostly women and children. That sucks.
Yeah.
And, we're working to change that. Mexico is now China's largest auto export market. Mexico. In June, Norway EV sales were at 97.7% share of sales. Now, that is all cars with a plug-in.
Yeah.
97.7% as they phase out the sale of fossil fuel light-duty vehicles. Sweden's EVs their share of vehicle sales are at 65.3%. Ethiopia is number 3.
Wow.
Ethiopia at 60% because they said, hey, we're not going to screw around with fossil fuels anymore. They're screwing us. We sell them fossil fuels and they sell it back to us at high prices. And the guy running the country said no more. So no more generators, hopefully, too. That is incredible. Ethiopia is at 60%, and they are number 3. China is behind Ethiopia at 53% and itching upwards. UK's EVs are at 36%, Germany 28.4%, France 24%, and everybody else is below that. The oil and gas industry has played an outside role in shaping an Ohio carbon capture bill. This is laws that the government in Ohio, United States, have come up with, and guess who is involved in that? Oil and gas. From drafting legislation to courting lawmakers as sponsors. That's on Canary Media. The global nuclear power in good years adds only as much net capacities as renewables add every 2 days. In a good year, we add as much nuclear capacity as we do every 2 days with renewables. But no, we need nuclear. How many cigarettes are you indirectly smoking due to air pollution levels? Using Berkeley Earth's rule of thumb to calculate the number of cigarettes people are indirectly smoking is based on that study. Delhi in India, 1,797 cigarettes.
Yeah, so this is an equivalent based on the kind of pollution that you're sucking into your lungs where you live.
On an average basis. And I will say this morning, our air is 50% of what New Delhi is.
Yeah.
On an average basis.
That's not good.
And that's just because of forest fire smoke on a good day. This is a good day for us now. As the day where I say, well, I can open the windows. It's only at like 53.
Yeah.
On the U.S. Air Quality Index. Lahore, Pakistan. Let's see. It goes down, down, down. There's a lot of places with bad air and a lot of cigarette smoking going on. That is your particulate matter of 2.5%, 2.5 size particulate matter pollution in cities worldwide. From ArsTechnica.com, Tesla is the least trusted car brand in America, a survey finds. And finally, this week on this mini episode, the writer of that letter to David Suzuki wrote that Suzuki inspired him with his previous messages. Here's a passage before we set sail into the depths of summer. 20-plus years ago, he says, you wrote something that has stayed with me. It's as true today as it was then. Quote, the way we see the world shapes the way we treat it. If a mountain is a deity, not a pile of ore, if a river is one of the veins of the land, not potential irrigation water, if a forest is a sacred grove, not timber, if other species are our biological kin, not resources, or if the planet is our mother, not an opportunity, then we will treat each other with respect. This is the challenge, to look at the world from a different perspective. Brian?
And wonderful words to end the show on. You can contact us, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. Around social media, we are Clean Energy Pod. And of course, our Patreon, patreon.com/cleanenergypod. We always have that merch store as well. And remember to hit the follow or subscribe button in your podcast app for new episodes every week.
And thank you to Patreon Clean Club executive members, Green Bastard, Brett Rowley. We'll get to the rest of you, I think, after our repeat episode next week, and give shout-outs to those people who get that on one of their perks. We have a rerun next week as I get back from vacation, and on Thursday we'll have our Patreon podcast, more than likely, come out. That is for Clean Club members on our Patreon levels there. You can listen to the first 10 minutes for free. Patreon.com/CleanEnergyPod. We'll see you again for our next regular show, August 20th. Keep enjoying your summer, unless you're down south and you're still enjoying it too in Oceania. Cheers to everyone.
See you next week.